Hello, everybody. This is Zach's at it again. I'm your host, Zach Cooley, and I'm honored to be here with one of the preeminent George Harrison impersonators in the world, Mr. Gavin Pring. It is an honor to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being with me.
Hey, no worries, Zach. Thanks for having me as a guest on your show. I'm looking forward to our chat, conversation / connection.
There we are. And I am fortunate enough to talk to you today because you are performing, well, you actually will not be performing with the other lads of the Fab Four at the Roanoke show. But the reason that I'm talking to you in particular is because my daughter, my 11-year-old daughter Bella, a lifelong Beatles fan, found you on the internet and just absolutely became your number one fan. She said, "Daddy, you have to get an interview with this guy. I don't know what you have to do, but you have to get an interview with this guy because he is amazing." She is one of these who believes that George Harrison is one of her spirit guides. I also believe that he is, because she has led me to this great opportunity to talk with you because she is a tremendously huge fan of yours. So even though you won't be with us at the Roanoke show, I'm honored to be able to talk to you because you are the preeminent George Harrison impersonator. Can you tell me how that started for you?
It all started kind of by accident. I was in Liverpool. I was working in a place at the Queen's Dock for customs and excise. So ironically, I was a taxman for a little while, and a girlfriend at the time answered an ad in the Liverpool Echo, and it said that the title of the ad was "Do you look like a Beatle, or do people say you do?" And I never really thought at the time that I resembled George Harrison, but obviously every time I was in an original band, and every time there was a review, it would say the lead guitarist Gavin Pring hails from Liverpool, but you'd swear that he was a direct descendant of George Harrison. So every time I went out and played, people would say that, people that didn't know. So she auditioned me. She basically put my name down for this audition, and I went up to Hayman's Green where they were filming this documentary called Best of the Beatles about Pete Best, and I was just waiting in line. I really didn't think I was going to get the gig, to be honest with you. I was just in a line with loads of other people, and Pete Best's brother, his name's Rogue, came along and said, "Have you come for George?" And I said, "No, but if he's here, I'll take him." And he liked the sense of humour, and then he said, "Right, I'll tell you what, no, if anyone's come to play George, you don't need to. We found our George." So then I did a little part in a documentary called Best of the Beatles, and that kind of started the whole ball rolling, really.
Fantastic. And then about how long ago was that? And that's from that point on you became a part of the Fab Four?
Yeah, there's a longer story. I went for another audition for a show called Lennon in His Life, but they were looking for a John Lennon. But a lot of people came anyway, people who could speak like the Beatles, people who could look like them but not play, etc. And so I went for that, and while I went upstairs, they said, "Oh yeah, we're looking for a Lennon." And I said, "Well, I've just come because I did this documentary as George, but just in case." And they went, "Yeah, okay then." So they auditioned me, and in the line or in the background were two brothers, Jimmy and Tony Coburn, who played John and Paul in a Liverpool-based Beatles tribute band called they were called the Blue Meanies. And so the Blue Meanies needed a George for this show, so they said, "Well, can you play?" And I said, "A little bit." And so I ended up playing with them, and that was my first Beatles tribute act. And we went over to the Isle of Man, and we played at the TT races for all the the motorbike competition that they have over there. And then from then on, I just started playing with them every Thursday in Matthew Street in Liverpool, and we got some corporate shows too. Like we played on a cruise ship and stuff like that. And then eventually it didn't work out with the Blue Meanies, and one Beatle Week, a band called British Export from Chicago, were playing at Beatle Week, and the band that I was playing with didn't turn up, so I ended up playing on my own for about an hour. And
wow.
and so what happened was, so there was 2,000 people in the Adelphi Hotel with no one. No one was performing. So the guy that I knew, his name's Lance, I had an acoustic guitar and he had like 3 strings on it, and the guy says, you've got to get up and play because there's no band. The other members of the Blue Meanies haven't turned up. And I said, well, I used it as an excuse. I was like, I've just got this guitar, but it's only got like 3 strings on it. So he took it and he gave it to an engineer, and he said, right, put strings on it, tune it. He said, what's your excuse now? And I was like, I haven't got one. So I ended up playing to about 2,000 people at the Adelphi, and just basically I didn't know that many George songs at the time, but I just threw out everything that I knew. I was played Here Comes the Sun, If I Needed Someone, My Sweet Lord, Give Me Love. I just threw out as many songs because I wasn't ready to do a show on my own. And then everyone went nuts for me, just like, yeah, that's crazy. And then luckily in that audience was a band called British Export from Chicago, and they said, do you want to help us because we need a George in South Korea for a tour for 5 weeks? And I said, yeah, right then. So I jumped in with them. Then I eventually moved to Chicago and played with them, and then 2 years after that I got an audition with the Fab Four. So the Fab Four is not my first tribute act to the Beatles. It started in '99 playing with other bands really, and then eventually landing in Las Vegas. It's funny because I learned to play guitar around '97, but in 2004 I was on the Las Vegas Strip. It was quite quick, really, for me. It was about 6 years before I was playing in America, and it was good. It was a good thing. Every decision was just a small decision. Like, I'll just play with this band for a little bit, or I'll just move over to here. I didn't think, nearly 20 years later that I'd be living in California. Actually, over 25 years later, I'll be living in America. Became an American in 2019. I have a son here and a wife, and it was just very small decisions that ended up, when you look back, like a big thing that happens, But yeah, I don't know. That was a long, a long explanation, wasn't it?
Well, that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to be sure and get the full story, because there are Beatle tribute bands all over the world. There are. Everybody wants to be the Beatles because they're the greatest band in the world, no matter whether they're your favorite or not. If you're into rock music, you have to acknowledge that Beatles are the greatest band in the world and the most imitated. So to become a Beatle tribute band is one thing, but to become successful as a Beatle tribute band is another thing. So the fact that you are recognized as one of the top Beatle tribute bands in the entire world must mean that you have some extraordinary talents and extraordinary gifts on your own.
Yeah, I don't know if I have extraordinary gifts. I think when you have a team of people, each person brings something different to the team. And I was never really a good or great musician. I could play, but there's people that can play way better than me. But when you look at a Beatles tribute individual, you need to at least resemble the guy, at least need to play the songs or the parts that he plays on the record, or at least be open to playing the parts. Because sometimes on Sgt. Pepper, Paul McCartney played the lead and bass, but you can't play the lead and bass live. So, the George guy will play the lead, even though it's a George didn't play it. So, you have to be open. So the first thing is attitude. You have to be open to say, right, this is what I need to do. Obviously, the first thing must be resemblance, in my opinion. You must, if you 250 pounds and you look like, Carrot Top, and you say, I want to be Ringo Starr, you might be like, well, you're not really going to fit the criteria to be Ringo Starr, even if you've got the best voice in the world. And that's the thing, you have a criteria for each thing. Do you look them, resemble them? Can you make it happen? Do you sound like them? Can you play like them? Are you open to doing it? And then there's so many different things that go into it. And then you need to find three people, other people that have the same attitude. Three other people that are very good at what they do, or look like them, or sound like them, or play like them, or whatever. And then you need to row in the same direction, even though you might have different opinions on how it should be run. I've always been good at going into an interview or going on television and talking. Some of the other guys are not good at that. After the gig, they stay in the hotel room and they don't hang out with anyone. They go on the computer and they look for Beatles merchandise. I don't. I go straight out. I go out and I have a drink and I talk to people. I'm very social. So now you've got a situation where each individual brings, like I say, something different. Business-wise, we need to do this. Someone might be good at computers. Someone might be good at social media. And then you've got me. I can talk to people. So within the group, now you have a talent or a skill that can push the boat. And that's what the Fab Four is really good at. And the Fab Four is really good at finding people, bringing what they are good at, their talent, to the surface, So it's like, that's kind of like, that could be applied to any business, any venture, any band, anything. Not everyone needs to be a great musician. You can have four LeBron Jameses in a team. They're all really good at shooting, so who gets the ball? Everyone's good at shooting, so now we need someone who's good at defense. Now we need someone who's good at coaching. Now we need someone who can talk to everyone. So that's the thing about the Fab Four that I think is really good, is that we can find people and find their talents and bring it to the surface and say, right, this guy's really good at doing all four impressions of the Beatles. We'll make it so that if there's an audition for someone who's doing a Yellow Submarine voiceover thing, that's the guy. So we've got that covered. And we've got Adam, who looks exactly like John Lennon. So if we're going to take photographs, let's take photographs of Adam because he looks like John Lennon. And that's kind of I think the trick, really. I think you have to be good on your own, but you have to be good as a team.
Absolutely, because the Beatles were a team for sure. Being from Liverpool and being born in Liverpool, were you a lifelong Beatle fan, or was that something that just you had to kind of develop as you went along?
Yeah, so imagine growing up in a town where the band left the town. So say you were, just as example, say you were in Seattle and you were into Nirvana. And so Nirvana leave and they do very well. People know them. They started like that kind of indie alternative kind of way. They look scruffy, but so they started a new thing. Now, Nirvana were very good, and every town has, or almost every town has, like a story of a band that make it. But Liverpool, which is a very small town, had the band that made it bigger than any other band that has ever existed. And so when I grew up inside Liverpool, going, well, every place has a band that made it well. I didn't really realise how big the Beatles were. There's only one band in the history of the world that I know that made people who didn't even speak English want to learn their songs. Czech Republic people, what was Czechoslovakia? Czech Republic people learned to sing it, even though English wasn't the first language. Japanese tribute bands like the Aspreys and, learned English songs because they loved the Beatles. No other band has that. For me, that's the biggest kind of reflection on how big the Beatles were. People who couldn't speak the language learned to speak English to play the Beatles because they were so influential and so great and so spiritual and so, just the best. So I'm in Liverpool going, yeah, well, the Beatles were all right, not knowing until I travelled to every country in the whole world going, no, the Beatles weren't just all right. The Beatles were the best. They'll never be surpassed. And so when I grew up, I wasn't really into them. I was into the bands of the time in the 80s and 90s. I was into Oasis and Echo and the Bunnymen and other bands that were around in the north. And I was always like, yeah, the Beatles are all right, And then when I started to play them, I was like, they're not just all right. They're musically great. And again, like a good business. If you've ever read any of the anthology stuff, they make good decisions. Like they had this solo on Here Comes the Sun. And George Harrison, it was a pretty good solo, but it didn't fit the song, so they took it out. And that's what the Beatles were good at as well. They made the right decisions. So we got an intro for 8 days a week going, great. Nah, it's not going to work. So they took it out. And it's like, that's also a skill of the Beatles to make sure that even when they played well or they did something that was creative, that they went, no, that's not going to work. And they just, as a team, they just worked together. So to answer your question, I didn't think the Beatles were anything until I started to really listen to them. And then when I travelled across everywhere, to South Korea, like I say, in Japan, been to China, been to all over Europe, I've been to all 50 states of America. There's no other band like them. And that makes me proud to be from Liverpool, makes me proud of the lads. And they wrote about simple things too. They didn't write about pollution and like, we better stop the pollution. We better, they wrote about the places that they grew up in, Penny Lane and a girl called Eleanor Rigby and falling in love and being jealous. Like, I'm jealous of it. I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man. Think of every emotion that you've got. Hatred, I don't want to spoil the party. Love. Almost every song that the Beatles sung about was love. They mention it. Like, there's a reason why the show in Las Vegas was called Love, because they mentioned this. She loves you. All you need is love. Can't buy me love. Everything's about. Think of an emotion, and I'll tell you a Beatles song that covers that emotion. And that's the other thing that the Beatles did. They connected to people on a spiritual level in a simple way. When someone that you love passes away, there's a song for that. There are places I remember. Like, everything is beautiful and everything is great, and what they've done is, it will never ever be. And that's why people are attracted to the Beatles as well. That's why they want to join a Beatles band, because it's almost like, you think about religion. There's like people who go around like the Crusades, like, listen to this religion, listen to this. That's kind of what we're like in a way. We're almost like the Crusades of the Word, and the Word is the Beatles, and that's the Bible. And that's the thing that you turn around and go, yeah, you've got problems. Listen to this. This will remove you from your problems for a bit. If there's anything that's pure heaven, it's listening to the Beatles and drifting off into that world. And nothing else I've found, again, I've been all over this world, can connect like the Beatles singing about simple things. And I don't think I can say it any better than that, really.
Absolutely. And the other obvious question, have you had an opportunity to meet any of the original Beatles?
Yeah, I hung out with Paul for a little while, because when George passed away in the end of 2001,
right,
on his birthday, which would have been like 4 months later, in the February, there was a show that was put on by the people of Liverpool, the council, and all these artists came over from Europe and to play on it. So this is a couple of months, 8 months or so before the concert for George, which was in the Royal Albert Hall.
Right.
Liverpool did a show in 2002, and it was a celebration of George's life. The cool thing was, Paul said to the organisers, I'll come down, but if you tell people that I'm coming or you advertise that I'm coming, I won't come down.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the reason why he did it was because he wants to come as a fan of George rather than the house be full of Paul McCartney fans knowing that Paul McCartney was going to be there.
Right.
Generally, if you're a Beatle fan, you like Paul and George and John and Ringo anyway.
Right.
But I thought that was very tasteful of him to, it shows his, it shows that he's not, look at me, you know what I mean, that he's self-centered. It's more like, I want to come, as a fan of George myself, which he was, and so that's when I met him backstage. He said to me, he goes, you look a little bit like George, and I said, you look a little bit like Paul. So I got a laugh out of him, and then he was like, oh, George would have loved this, just all the people coming together and playing his songs, to all the Scousers. So it was one of the best nights I've ever had, really.
Yeah, no greater gift for you, for sure. That is quite amazing. Absolutely amazing. And the Fab Four has been very successful on their own. I was reading through the bio that Jean was kind enough to send. And she's telling... And I read that your images were used for the Beatles Rock Band video game. Am I correct in that?
It wasn't the images; it was the motion capture. So
the motion capture.
The way the technology worked is that they could make two-dimensional things happen. Like if they wanted to make George's mouth move and stuff like that, then they could do that. But they didn't have any capture of the motion. They have any capture, so you have to wear these kind of scuba suits, which leave nothing to the imagination.
Right.
They had like these little reflective kind of like sensors on them, and so when you go into like this room, the room has all these cameras that can capture the motion of you. So you can kind of like, if you lift your arms on a computer, the image will be lifting, and then you can map John or Paul or George over it. And so, the technology was brand new, really, back when the Rock Band came out. Computer game, Resident Evil and all those other computer games have been using motion capture, but it wasn't really sophisticated as it is now. You can almost not even tell the difference. But and that's what we did. We did the motion capture. So when we were in the Gavin Club, we had to kind of mimic the moves. And again, it's a little dated now, but the Fab Four as a company, we used to do about 8 or 9 of the songs. If I needed someone, Taxman, to name the George songs, and then I Am the Walrus, and a lot of good motion captures, I think.
And you all won an Emmy?
Yeah, we won an Emmy for our 2012 production of, it was the Fab Four, and it was live at Pechanga, which is not too far away from me. I'm up in by Ontario Airport, so it's about an hour south of there, just to give you a little perspective of where it is. It's nice and hot, and it's got like a desert feel. Mm-hmm. So it was in a casino there, and we did our PBS special, and then the PBS special we were nominated for a couple of awards. We won an Emmy for that, which was great. We won a few Telly Awards too, which obviously the Emmy is the big one. And then I don't know what happened if we could have been put forward to a Grammy, but it wasn't our music. So I think it was not, it wasn't put forward for that, which makes sense. But right. We're the only tribute act in existence to have an Emmy award. So that gives us a little legitimate thing to say, hey, we have an Emmy.
It was one of the things that stuck out to me, absolutely. And the reason that I'm fortunate enough to talk to you is that you are playing in our area. I'm about an hour and 15 minutes from Roanoke, Virginia. And the Fab Four will be playing there on September 25th at 7:30 at the Berglund Performing Arts Theatre. Tell us why we are not fortunate enough to be able to see you on that date.
Because we have a couple of teams of players. So we have 3 Johns, 3 Pauls, 3 Georges. And so we end up choosing which shows. Obviously, finances is to do with it too. The guy who's playing John is flying in from England. So there's a lot of costs involved, unfortunately. I've played Roanoke a couple of times, though. I've been to Roanoke, Virginia. Actually, on that tour, that the guys, you're going to have Robbie, and Robbie is probably one of the best George Harrisons I've ever seen in my life. So you're in good hands.
No doubt.
He doesn't sound like me when he talks, but he's young and he looks great and he can play guitar and keyboards. He's a really good musician, and so he'll be on that show. Unfortunately for me, I never get to hang out with the other Georges, because if I'm on the show, then the other Georges on another team, so they're somewhere else. So I think that's what's happening in September. The 25th, we also have, on the 26th and 27th, we're going to be playing in North Carolina and South Carolina too. Durham, North Carolina the next day, I think. And so I think the show that we're doing at Roanoke is going to be the Help show. The other 2 shows in North Carolina and South Carolina are going to be the USA shows, which we did on the last season, which was the music of Meet the Beatles. So anyone going to Roanoke, Virginia, if they want to travel the next day to North Carolina, they'll see a different show, so.
Well, if we're lucky enough to get you in Roanoke again, do make sure that we have a chance to say hello to you, because I have this privilege of speaking to you because my 11-year-old daughter, Bella, is such a fan. So she is the one who introduced me to the Fab Four, and she is the one who lined me up with this gig of talking to you all and being able to review the show. So I owe a lot to my daughter for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Bella. Thank you for the
Yes.
compliments.
Yes.
You know, I don't really consider myself to be the best because I'm looking out. You know, like just looking out from my two eyes, looking out at the world, and I
Sure.
was just like, you know, think to myself, I'm okay. You know, I learned the songs and I tried to connect people. But I think what's good is you said that Bella's a big fan of George Harrison, and that's what we have in common. I'm a big fan of George Harrison. I love George, and I think his songs. I think he's the spirit of the Beatles. You know, Paul was kind of the look, and obviously they're all musically talented. But George's solo songs sounded more like Beatles songs than the other guys.
Right.
Like John's solo song sounded like John, and
Right.
Paul's solo song sounded like Paul, and George's kind of sounded like the Beatles to me. You know, even when he left,
Right.
when we was Fab, it's just a really good nod to the Sgt. Pepper era, and
Right.
you know, at least he was singing about being in the Beatles. I think John and Paul kind of went, right, that's behind me. I'm just going to go and do my own thing and sing about being with Yoko, and Paul singing about being with Linda, and George was like, well, you know, we were pretty good, you know. Yeah, we were pretty good, you know. Sort of like,
Yeah.
he was he's reflective and he's very spiritual, and so that's what me and Bella have in common, is the fact that we really love George Harrison. We like his music, and you know, and I think it's such a big compliment, you know, to me, that she thinks that I remind her of George, which is kind of the aim. You know, the aim is to make people forget the problems and remind them of what great music the Beatles made. And so if you can, for a couple of seconds, take people away from the regular. I mean, the world's more divisive now than it's ever been. We need more of the music and the stuff that unites us, you know, now more than ever. And so if a person in the audience that I don't know looks at me and I'm playing Here Comes the Sun or something, and they get emotional, then I've done my job, which is to try to channel George in a way through my love of him and watching him and trying to mimic some of his moves, and then you know, and then it's live, so you really can't get away. Like if you watch a movie, you can always get distracted by your phone and go, right, what's on the phone or whatever. If you watch a show, you're trapped on either side by people, so you have to like let the emotions hit you like a wave, you know. And that reminds me, it's funny because Eric Idle came to the show when we were playing in Vegas one time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Las Vegas is full of impersonators. Like, you could look out and see an Elvis guy, or, you know, a guy from, you know, any band. You see an Elton John impersonator in the audience. So we were performing, and in the first set, I saw someone in the third row that looked like Eric Idle. So when we were doing the costume change and the Ed Sullivan was out talking, I said to the guys, does anyone see that guy? Like, he's close to the kind of centre, but he's like third row back. He looks like Eric Idle. And he was like, no, I haven't seen him. I was like, did you see him? And I spoke to the John guy. I was like, did you see that guy? He's like, no, I was looking over there. I was looking at some girl or whatever it is, you know. And I was like, oh, I'm sure that looked like Eric Idle, but maybe it wasn't. You know, maybe it was just some guy who looks like Eric Idle. So anyway, when I got to Here Comes the Sun, I did like a little... you know, speech about George and stuff. You know, John and Paul wrote great songs, but what about George, basically, you know? And I sung Here Comes the Sun. And while I was playing, I could see this guy's shoulders just, like he'd lost it. Like he completely broke down and was crying. Like his arms were going, his head was in his, you know, his hands, where he was wiping the tears away. And I was like, oh, that really got to this guy. I don't know, you know. Anyway, it turns out it was Eric Idle. He came backstage and he was like, man, that was just, you gave me a gift. Like, that was just, you just channeled George to me, and I was friends with him, and, you know, it was just that you just, something happened there, and I was great. And I think that was a great compliment, as equal to Bella's compliments of me. I think Eric Idle crying his eyes out because he used to love and be friends with George Harrison. It's like, you know, and then I've got Paul McCartney saying, you look a bit like George. I'm like, there's got to be something. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, you know, what I'm doing. What I'm doing is just loving George Harrison and his music. It's very simple for me. So there's something else maybe happening, and, you know, and I'm grateful for it because I've seen the world, and I've played in front of lots of people like yourself and beautiful Bella. You know, we played all over the show, and we don't know who we touch as far as, you know, influencing people to be like, hey, the world's not such a bad place, really. You know, we're all kind of the same. When you break it down, you know, we all just want to be friends with people and have a safe place for our families to grow up in. Do you know what I mean? And we could get back to that. I think the world would be a better place, and I think that's what the Beatles' true thing is. And again, it's about love, you know, rather than hate. And that's, again, I've got on another blunderbuss about stuff, but that's the way I get passionate about the Beatles, and especially George.